What comes to mind when you think of the worst set in Magic's history? Fallen Empires for being a low-powered set that was way overprinted, Dragon's Maze for having a million clue stones flooding an already underwhelming set, or maybe Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch for revisiting one of Magic's best planes and coolest villains, and then forgetting everything that made them awesome. Despite the flaws of these sets, they don't quite compare to what has generally been decided as Magic's definitive worst set, Homelands. Released in 1995, it was the 7th non-block expansion of Magic, taking place on the plane of Olgrotha, and it really is the worst set. I mean, just look at some of these cards. Now, generally a lot of people might look at older sets and think that they were all bad due to the cards mostly looking, well, unplayable by today's standards, but at the time that's how the cards were, and Homelands was still really bad in comparison. I mean, it was so bad that WotC implemented a rule requiring people to have at least 5 cards from each legal set in their deck, just so that people would buy them and play with these cards at tournaments. If you want to know more about why it was bad, or the story of Homelands itself, I'm going to recommend you check out this video by The Magic Show. I'll put a link in the description. The video is very detailed and touches on a lot of things that I won't be talking about. The basic gist of why it's so bad is that it wasn't really designed by Magic designers. Instead, the head designers of Homelands were from elsewhere in the company, one coming from customer service and the other from the continuity team. Their focus was to try and build a set from a story standpoint first and focus on gameplay eventually. And yeah, when you look at the set, it definitely shows. From a gameplay standpoint, it really sucks, but from a flavor standpoint, I think it's kind of fun. Alright, let's look at some cards from the set, and why not start with the best? Here's what are generally considered the best cards from this set. They're the most expensive and will actually see the most play, pretty much exclusively in EDH. Of note, Merchant Scroll was also printed in Homelands first, but since getting more reprints it's not worth as much as these cards. Interestingly enough, 2 of the 3 cards only recently became useful. Wall of Kelp jumped up to being the most expensive card in the set once Arcades was spoiled, and Didgeridoo found a home in Minotaur decks once Amonkhet gave some more support to the tribe. Speaking of tribes, Homelands had some pretty interesting creature types and tribal support. It introduced a lot of creature types such as Hero, Carriage, and my personal favorite, Narwhal. Sadly, all of these and many more were later errated, and Narwhals are no longer with us. Of the many creature types that appear within this set, dwarves, fairies, and minotaurs are the most prevalent and receive the most support. Fairies get some okay support with a lord and a creature that has the ability to flash fairies directly in from your hand. The dwarven support is definitely weaker, and I find it weird that the art primarily features a pony and a boat. By far, the minotaurs are the best and most developed of the 3, but there's still some weird choices within the tribe. The weird part definitely comes in on the choice of what is typed as a minotaur and what isn't. One of the support cards within the set is a ghost instead of being a minotaur, which makes it a little bit more clunky in the decks, and some of the cards that feature minotaurs aren't even minotaurs. But I want to focus more on what I actually do like about Homelands, and that's the art. Specifically, the fact that for all of the 25 commons in the set, the artists assigned to a card created 2 different pieces. Fallen Empires, the set prior to Homelands, also had alternate artwork for commons, but in this case there were 3 or 4 different pieces made. Personally, I think this is a bit too overwhelming. Additionally, different artists were making pieces for the cards, so they lacked a stylistic consistency. For each of the commons in Homelands, both illustrations were made by the same artist. And generally it was just 2 different versions of the same prompt or idea, but they're still pretty interesting to look at. As a kid, the art that stuck with me the most was Abby Matron for some reason. I think it's something about the 4th wall break and just the horror on that face. Willow Fairy is a great example of sexualization going overboard in both ways in fantasy art. Of all the seemingly unrelated art pieces, my favorite is definitely Folk of Van Hava. These 2 pieces, while not directly connecting, show 2 different aspects of a town. On one card you get an image of a simple free celebration, and on the other you get a quiet, lonely moment of a single member of the community. It's not much, but I really think it helps flesh out life on Olgrotha and make the world feel more like an actual world, as the art should. Some of the art becomes incredibly close to syncing up, but doesn't quite get there. Ace and Bureaucrats seems like it's maybe the same place, with the clothing matching, but the landscape and building architecture is just slightly off, making me hesitant to believe it. Aliban's tower has the same sort of thing going on. The towers look the same, but the landscape is just too different. Shrink is one that always bothered me. I wish that the 2 different perspectives were the same figures, but it's pretty clear that they're not. I think it was a cool idea to show the spell from 2 different angles, but it's just a little bit off. Speaking of perspective, some cards have a distant perspective, and then the second card will zoom in to give more detail, like showing a normal looking boat and then zooming in on a grim crew. or Cemetery Gate, showing the quiet graveyard in one of the many towns and then showing us what lies hidden inside. I think that the two different versions help to actually communicate the theme of a simple, seemingly peaceful world and then revealing its darker undertones. I've heard people mentioning that Homelands and Algrotha were partially responsible for Innistrad, and after spending more time looking at these artworks, I can definitely see the hints of that. Now I save my favorite cards for last. Only 4 sets of cards link up like this, and it's kind of random, but I love every single set of them and the effect that they create. These Minotaurs are pretty simple, but they align so smoothly. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing, but I had these cards for over a decade, and I only recently realized that they connected with each other. This one is definitely the goofiest, and some of the goofiest art in Homelands. Cajafoglio's style is definitely unique and interesting, but I think it really doesn't fit in with the rest of the world in Homelands. Dark Maze is the last of the dual arts that I'll be showing, and it's my personal favorite. I love the grim colors and the effect that you get when you connect the two cards. I love that the effect from a single card, you can't quite realize that you're in a maze, but as you piece them together, the scale and severity of it starts to come together. And that's part of what I think makes this set good. While not all of the art succeeded, what does creates a feeling of a seemingly simple, rural plane that holds dark secrets waiting to be uncovered. I just wish that the overall set wasn't so bad. Sadly, after Homelands, this practice of alternate art mostly disappeared. Wizards came to the conclusion that alternate art diminishes card recognition and makes the actual gameplay a bit more confusing and slow. And this makes sense to me. A big part of playing competitive Magic is being able to recognize cards quickly and understand what they do so you can start formulating your response. Not being able to recognize cards quickly and effectively kind of makes this a bit more awkward. Since Homelands though, alternate arts popped up in a few places. In Planeshift, Skyship Weatherlight, Urtai, and Tangarth all got alternate artworks on their foils. Interestingly, this time instead of having the same artist do both versions, Kev Walker was the one to illustrate the foil versions of each card. Conspiracy used the idea of alternate art on a foil for Kaya, Ghost Assassin, in honestly a fantastic way. The difference is subtle, having the character in the same setting but just performing a different action or pose. It avoids the alternate art confusion, as at a quick glance, they're essentially the same card. Not to mention that the rarity of a foil mythic means that not many people are going to be running into these anyways. After Kaya, there were no alternate artworks in booster packs until War of the Spark, where alternate artworks made an awesome and really huge comeback. Within Japanese booster packs of War, you could randomly get alternate art versions of each of the 36 planeswalkers in the set. This type of alternate artwork has never been available in booster packs before, and fans have honestly loved it. It really makes me excited, because let's face it, WotC is a company, and the decision to continue doing alternate artworks like this is going to be decided off of how well it sells. Hopefully, the success of this means that alternate artworks may be able to continue finding a home in Magic. But that's what I want personally. How do you feel about alternate artworks? Which version is your favorite? Love them, hate them? Let me know what you think. This is the first Magic video I've made, and I'd love to make more, so if you have any suggestions for future videos you'd like to see, please comment below. Thank you for watching.